So
Oh,
Shabbat Shalom and welcome, Rabbi Address.
hi. Donna Medina. I see. That's a nice house you live in. Uh, that's cool. Looks like, never mind. All right. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see all of you in everybody's appropriate Zoom boxes. My name is Richard Address. Thank you for the invitation to explore with you one of the great Torah portions in our tradition. It happens to be this week's portion. Um, it's in my annual rating of Torah portions. This is in the top three um, because it's filled with all kinds of ethical, moral, personal challenges, even more so this year than even any other years. And it is very, very, very personal, this Torah portion. Um, so I've been informed by Sherry that you're not shy and that you have no problem sharing your ideas and opinions. I hope that's true, because this is a Torah portion that does not beg for a sermon, although it's very sermonic, but really begs for conversation. So if those of you who did bring your Torahs, any Torah commentary or Torah that you have, we're going to go to Genesis chapter 32, verse 4. 32, verse 4 to begin. But first, as I'm sure you are used to, join me in the bracha for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yishmeru
העולם,
b'mitzvotav
אנו
v'tzivanu la'asok
בסימן
b'divrei Torah.
בדברי תורה.
The word there, the operative word there, as my very, very good best friend Jakey Oliver Shalom used to teach, is la'asok, which means to let the text speak to you. And I want you to open up your souls to let this text speak to you, because it's going to speak to you in a variety of different ways. First of all, let's go right to the beginning of the Torah portion. The scene is, I don't know any of you are like stage people or play people or dramatic people, but if you were staging this, this would be a great stage. Because here you have 20 years after all the manipulation and by Esau and Jacob and the mother, the Rebecca fooling Isaac, but he didn't fool what he really was fool. That was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Jacob is now coming back home with his entourage, his wives, his concubines, his everything else. And he's been informed that his brother Esau, who he ripped off, as we say in New Jersey, is also coming to meet him. And so the scene is set. Jacob doesn't know. The tension in the text is he doesn't know whether Jacob is going to kill him, Esau is going to kill him as a result of vengeance for what happened in the previous generations. And obviously, as you can see in the text, he sends everybody away, for your own safety, I'm just going to do this myself. So if you go to verse 23, this is one of the great scenes in Torah. The stage is empty. Jacob, center stage. He has sent everybody away. He knows over the horizon is his brother coming. He doesn't know what to do, to kill him or to embrace him. He sends everybody away. The spotlight shines. He is alone by the river Jabbok. Now, you may have studied this before, but I always like to point it out. There are motifs and themes within the Torah that reappear constantly. In the book of Genesis, especially, water. Water is a symbol of transition. Something big is going to happen. If you remember Rebecca at the well, Laban, everything, wells, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I forget, Isaac redigging the wells of his father Abraham. Water is a symbol. When you see water in the Torah, especially in the book of Genesis. That's the biblical author's way of telling you something momentous is about to happen. Water, and Hollywood uses the same image. In the 50s, before they did sex scenes, when they wanted to tell you that the two people were having relations, water, what's the best scene ever in that? From Here to Eternity. Remember the Deborah Carr and whoever was Kirk Douglas, whatever. They're rolling around in the surf as the sun sets, and
Oh, yeah.
they're not talking Torah, or they're not going over this week's NFL schedule. Okay, okay, and then period. So here you have Jacob at the river Jabbok, and this is a great high holiday word, and you're not getting that sermon because we don't have the time, although it's a very good sermon. The word livado, verse 25, Jacob was left alone. Livado. This is the same livado that appears in Genesis 2:18 when God says to Adam, it's not good that you're alone. You got to do something. We got to bring you something to keep you company. And then they create woman. In the second creation, remember we have two creation stories. So Jacob is alone. What happens now? Those of you who read ahead or saw this did not make it into the movie. What happens now with Jacob is alone? What happens to him?
In the older text, I was to understand that Jacob wrestled with an angel. And the angel was
even in the New Text. No, he wrestles with, here's the thing. Look at the thing. Jacob was left alone. Verse 25. Here it is. Vayivater Yaakov livado. Jacob is alone. V'ya'avak, which is a Hebrew play on words on the river Jabbok. V'ya'avok ish imo. He wrestles with an ish. What's the English translation of ish? Man. All right. Who the hell is this ish? Anybody want to hazard a guess? First thing that comes what?
From my recollection in the text, he refuses to reveal his name after asking Jacob's name. But this wrestler will not say his.
Correct. So,
can I say something?
no, it's your Torah, so you can say anything you want.
Well, I don't know if this is true, but somebody told me that it was Esau's spirit of hatred. I don't know.
Is that Donna?
Yes.
Okay, because all I see is your house, which is a very lovely house. Donna mentions oh, you're by the ocean. That's even better. Where's there an ocean in Colorado?
Yeah, right.
My God.
It's in Israel.
You get around, my dear. You get around. Donna mentions the Jewish tradition in its voluminous amounts of commentaries, and there's thousands and thousands of commentaries, especially on this particular passage, was very, very bothered by who this Ish is. In the classical commentaries and in some of the artwork, the Ish is an angel. Parenthetically, the word Ish appears a couple of times as this undefined thing. One of the ones when one of the classes we teach as part of my Jewish sacred aging work in Genesis 37:15, when Joseph is sent out to find his brothers, on the way to looking for her brothers, he meets an Ish, and he and Ish have this one sentence dialogue around which the entire history of biblical Judaism changes. Some of the commentaries, Donna is correct, say this is really Esau, or the spirit of Esau coming to get Jacob, as retribution for what happened previous generation. But I want you to hold on to that because that's going to come back in a couple of seconds on another interpretation that I want to share with you based upon some of these interpretations. Third interpretation, if it's not Esau's spirit, if it's not an angel, who else could Jacob be wrestling with?
Himself.
Aha. Who said himself? I can't. Okay. Okay, Michael is absolutely correct. So if you're from a mental health perspective, he's wrestling with himself. Why? Every single one of us, if we look back on our lives, have done exactly what Jacob is doing. We have wrestled with things in our life. What's the result of the wrestling? What's the result of this wrestling?
Decisions are made.
More importantly than that.
Well, he gets a new identity.
Aha! Aha! He gets a new identity. How do we know? His name goes from Yaakov to
Israel.
Israel. All right, now this is why this passage is so freaking important. His name, he wrestles, and as a result of that, he is changed. How many times have we all wrestled, me included, have we wrestled with something in our life?
Every day.
And as a result of that wrestling, we changed. We may have taken on a new identity. We may have had to make a decision, but we changed. The implications of this are overwhelming. We wrestle with ourselves. There's another interpretation if you're into psychology, the psychospiritual interpretations, that he is wrestling with perhaps his dark side, his shadow. For those of you who are Jungians, is this his shadow side? Is this his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination? He wrestles, and as a result, he's changed. How many times have each of us changed as a result of us wrestling with something? And we struggle. And we really wrestle. What else happens? What else happens as a result of this wrestling? His name is changed. What else? Look at the text, right?
Oh, he has the injury to his hip.
Injury. Okay. He's wounded. Now, Torah language is metaphorical language. It's symbolic language. Play with this idea of, as a result of this struggle, I emerged different. I emerged changed, but also I'm wounded. Don't think necessarily of wound as something like, oh my God, I got shot. But think sometimes, let your mind, psychologically, psychically, spiritually. Do each one of us carry wounds with us as we go through life? Yeah. How do you deal with those wounds? How do you deal with them? It's right out of the Torah portion. None of us gets out of this life, right? Unwounded. Every single one of us, there's 14 screens here. Every single one of us carries with us the wounds of living, just life. How have you dealt with them? Anybody want to? This is the Torah portion. How have you dealt with them? Some people never get over them. Some people find a way. I'm doing a program on Wednesday for a Thursday for a congregation on the theology of loss.
Mm.
How do you deal with these wounds? All of us have them. Anybody want to
Acceptance and finding meaning in the situation.
talk to me about acceptance?
Well, I mean, just finding a way to come to peace with what is, even though it is painful at, certain things. I mean, we all know that saying, you have to accept the things you cannot change, right? So I guess,
No, look, Sherry, I believe, especially as we get older, look, all of my work full time is with my Jewish sacred aging work.
mhm,
What I've come to understand is that we live, especially as we get older, with with certain tensions. One of the tensions I would suggest to you, based upon what you've said, is this tension of acceptance versus surrender. Learning to accept certain things is very, very, very difficult. But acceptance also can imply growth, as opposed to surrender, which can imply giving up.
mhm,
So, everybody on this call knows somebody, perhaps, let's just say, who is living with some sense of chronic illness. Medical technology has made this quite possible.
yeah,
Many of the people who we've dealt with, some of them maybe you, come to the conclusion, I have to accept that I have this change in my life. Yeah? I am living with rheumatoid arthritis. I am living with cancer. I am living with multiple sclerosis. I'm living with, I don't hear as well. I don't see as well. I need hearing aids. Okay. You know something? I'm alive. I accept this, as opposed to saying, oh my God, I'm living with all this. My life is over. I surrender. I just can't live anymore. You know people who make both choices. Both choices. Some people, and the reason why some people make choice A as opposed to choice B, that's another conversation for a much longer time that we have than we have here. You only do this for an hour, right?
we can go over if
Well,
people
it's up
would
to you
like.
guys.
I
I mean, you
mean,
guys may have something to do.
mhm,
So this idea of acceptance of the wounds really helps determine how we choose to deal with this. Really does determine the type of person we are. And I would imagine that each one of us knows people who are having to deal with this. This is a wrestling, by the way. This is also a wrestling, because it's wrestling with the very fabric of life. The very fabric of life. So Jacob wrestles. He undergoes an identity transformation, because we in our lives have many different identities throughout our life. We are Jacob throughout our lives. Okay. And he changes for the most part. There's a passage at the end of the Torah portion where he gets a lot of bad press because he didn't really change that much. But if we have time, we'll get to that. And this also is instructive, because change in the Jewish tradition is a constant. So if we had another conversation, is I would show you that Judaism is constantly changing. That's how we've survived. We have not survived because of God. We have not survived because of Torah. We've survived because Judaism has had the unique ability to adapt and innovate new forms of Judaism. And I don't know you very well. You guys don't know me at all, but we are in the process of creating a new American Judaism as we speak. Put that over here for a second. Okay. So this wrestling scene is absolutely unbelievably powerful because each one of us are doing it. And each one of us have done it. Each one of us is Jacob. Each one of us. And the ish that we struggle with in many cases is our own neshama. In the privacy of our own souls, we have struggled. And sometimes we prevail, sometimes we don't, by the way. And so Jacob prevails for the time being. Questions? Everybody clear? This is such a powerful passage. Such a powerful passage that it's great. It's great. So the water, remember the water symbolism, transition. So from now on, if you do Torah study and you come across somebody's at the river, what's the great water scene in the Torah? It's in the movie. It's in the movie.
The division of the Red Sea, of the
Right. I mean, it doesn't get more dramatic than that. And how can you beat that for transformation of a people? Because that's the transition from slavery into freedom. It's the water. So remember, anytime you see this, especially in Torah study, and you start seeing something by water, something by a well, the wadi, the dried river, you kind of think something for the Israelites to get to the promised land. What do they have to do? They have to do what? They have to cross what? You've all been to Israel.
Red Sea.
No, not the Red Sea, the Jordan River.
Oh.
Again, water, transformation, transition. And by the way, look, water is a very, very common religious symbol. What's the major water religious symbol in Judaism, other than the stuff we have in the Torah?
Could that be the mikveh?
Yeah, the mikveh, of course. Not only could it be, it is. It's a cleansing. It's a purification ritual, like the baptism. Okay, that's where they got it from. I mean, so and all these rituals combine. I mean, they flow. It's another study for another time. How a lot of this stuff just flows back and forth and back and forth. But the mikveh is one of the major water purification rituals that both men and women, and there's been an uptick in the use of mikvahs now in the United States, an uptick in the number of men going to, and the uptick of people using the mikvah, not necessarily for marriage, but for, I've been cured of cancer, I go to the mikvah. I've gotten divorced, I go to the mikvah. It's a real emerging ritual, change in ritual. One of the workshops we do is new rituals for new life stages, and we talk a little bit about some of this explosion of brand new rituals that have emerged in contemporary Judaism. So I want you to go to chapter 33.
Do you want me to share my screen, Rabbi?
Yeah, now's the time to share this screen, because this I'm going to put you guys to the test. You're all going to be biblical scholars after I take a sip of coffee. Okay. Chapter 33, very good. Scroll down to verse 4. Okay, stop. Okay. The context of this is, okay, the brothers are reunited. This is the after the river Jabbok, Jacob's there, Esau comes. They look at each other. Now, if you're staging this, Jacob has no idea whether Esau's going to come take out his Glock and shoot him. He doesn't know. He himself, verse 3, went on ahead and bowed low to the ground 7 times until he was near his brother. Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. Okay? Got that? That's what the text says. Now, look at the text. This also should be in, if you have a Hebrew text in front of you, what do you notice on the Hebrew text?
There are dots above every.
Over on the
Right. Okay. On the word Vayishlach, which is usually translated, and he kissed him, Vayivku, and they wept, they cried. All right? Simple. Haven't seen my brother. He didn't kill me. We embrace, and he kisses me. Okay. Sherry, go back to the gallery view.
Okay.
Okay, so I can see everybody.
Mhm.
All right. Now, this particular verse is damn unbelievable. Talk about drama. Okay. What kind of kiss is this?
Well, apparently the Masoretic scribes wanted you to focus on a very specific word because they put several dots above it.
Correct. Correct. This is like, as one scholar has said, like a nota bene if you're reading a book. You better pay attention to this because we really don't know what this really means. And so there are a ton, this appears once or twice in the Torah, a ton of commentaries on this word. So first of all, it talks about estrangement and reunion. Now, don't forget, some of you, every rabbi or cantor or clergy has had to counsel families who are dealing with estrangement. Everyone. Usually the tension comes up around life cycle events, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, or not unusual, a funeral. And the estrangement, as opposed to Jacob and Esau, who here both look at each other and say, you know, I got thousands of people in my family. You got thousands of people in your family. You got a bunch of wives, concubines, kids, slaves, camels, sheep, oxen, cars. You know, look, I let's bygones be bygones. I'm paraphrasing the Torah, and I'm going to go live here. You're going to go live there. We'll never look. We're not going to go to each other's house for Thanksgiving. We're not going on family vacations, but I've been treated okay. You've been treated okay. We should live and be well, which is exactly what the text says. They meet again at their father's funeral. But the tradition was concerned about what this word means, and he kissed him. What does the kiss mean? And was it a kiss? Yeah. What's one of the most famous kisses? Yes, go ahead, Richard.
Well, one of the interpretations was that he tried to bite him
Correct.
and kiss, and then they say that the Jacob's neck hardened up like stone, so that Esau tried to do this, his teeth got
had to go to the dentist right away. Right. The dentist down the street. So the commentators love to play with the Hebrew. So they took Vayishlach with a kuf and said, well, it could have been a kaf. Vayishlach with a kaf would mean, and he bit him.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
He bit him. Now, of course, it reminds you probably of one of the more famous kiss scenes where the kiss meant not I love you, but you're dead man. The movie was?
Godfather.
Right, The Godfather. Remember? Kiss Fredo. Next scene, Fredo's out on dies. The kiss. Now here's something else. The tradition argues or raises the question about, well, if this is a kiss, how sincere was it? How sincere is this? In negotiations sometimes, when people agree. Do they agree because they really, really, really want to enter into this relationship? Or do they agree and shake hands because there's really no other choice? I want you to think now, again, this is metaphorical language. Jump to what we're dealing with now. And these passages that we just talked about. The wrestling, the change, and the kiss. And translate that into the wrestling that the American Jewish community is now doing as a result of the war. Because we are wrestling.
Yes.
We are wrestling. And when this peace comes, as it will eventually, and there's a photo op on CNN with people agreeing or shaking hands, metaphorically, some people will say, is it really real? Or are they doing this just because too many thousands of human beings have been killed? Now, I have no answers for this, by the way. But the beauty of Torah study is that the Torah every week speaks to something that we're living. Regardless, it's amazing. It's amazing. All you have to do is just study Torah. And these passages that we're just talking about are right out of the headlines.
So are you saying the kissing is just symbolic and it's not real?
I'm asking you what you think. What do you think? That's what you think. Because remember, Esau is the progenitor of the Edomites, which become a traditional enemy of the Israelites. And we're still fighting this fight, aren't we? I mean, there's people who think this is new. These arguments have been going on for literally thousands of years over the same piece of territory, by the way. It's fascinating and sad. So I want you to play with this, of this symbolism here. Is the American Jewish community, as a result of this war, is it going to be changed? Is our community going to be one community before October the 7th, and after October 7th, it's a different American Jewish community?
Yes.
Yeah. And how do you see that? What's your guys' experience because you're living in right now, from what I'm hearing, several different states and parts of those states. What are you seeing? How are you seeing your Jewish community wrestle with this, and how changed is it? And is it generational? Because there's a lot of generational difference.
I'm seeing some people who were estranged from the religion or didn't practice becoming much more involved, maybe laying tefillin, maybe doing prayers. Many are changed for the positive. And in fact, I got a beautiful video of some young people in Israel who all their arms are together. They have been laying tefillin. So I think in some ways it's coalescing people together to feel more Jewish and to feel like we have to face not the enemy, but those who are anti-Semitic, those who are anti-Israel, as more of a united front.
Certainly some people are picking that up. I mean, there's no question about this. Certainly there is a little bubble of people saying, I will wear my Magen David outside. I will put my kippah on. Last week I did one of my podcasts, because we do a weekly podcast on my website. The podcast last week was with my colleague David Levin, who had just gotten off a plane from Israel on a rabbinic mission. And it was a tough interview. But he said, I've decided that I'm going to wear my kippah publicly. I don't care where it is anymore, as a show of solidarity. Okay? And that's one response.
I think I see this time a little differently.
Yep, go ahead.
I was born in 44. So I'm after the 30s in Germany and the early 40s. But there were people in the early 30s, the 30s and early 40s in Germany that felt differently about whether they should remain in a place that they called home, where they had relationships, and do something different because they were concerned. And many others decided not. And history records what happens to those who left and those who chose to stay. And I think in some degree, Jews today in the United States may have some similar feelings and may have a similar decision to make, not now, not today, not tomorrow, but over the next 8 to 10 years, who knows?
I'd say it may be 8 to 10 months. Not 8 to 10 years, but you're Chuck, right? Because I have Chuck and Nancy, and I assume you're Chuck. And that's
good guess.
in this day and age. I tell you, you can't. You have to be careful.
You do. I have a daughter named Elijah.
So listen, like I said, you never know.
Yeah.
But in a series of articles in the Times right after the war broke out, Bret Stephens wrote a very disturbing column, several columns, where he opined, this was about a week and a half after the war started, that where the instances of anti-Semitism was starting to become palpable around the United States of America. And as you know, the instances of anti-Semitism have like quadrupled since October 7th. And Stephens wrote a paragraph, it's over there somewhere, so I'm not going to waste time trying to find it. But he says, I'm scared, I'm concerned that what this war is going to be doing and the aftermath of it will signal again a global, quote, this is a quote, a global war against the Jews, unquote. Now, to read that in the New York Times was frightening. But you know that word I started with about 40 minutes ago, livado, alone? Jacob was alone. Mm-hmm. There's a growing feeling, and you'll tell me if you're picking it up in your area, but I picked it up in some of the workshops and conversations I've had since October 7th. And this was also implied in Schumer's speech yesterday to the Senate, saying, we supported all these causes, we marched for all these people, but now no one, we are livado. We are alone.
Rabbi, I agree with, I think those columns, most all of the columns that Bret Stephens has written recently have just been incredibly insightful. But I agree. I mean, to me, it has sort of shattered our sense of security and solidarity with other groups. Just this past week in Denver, we had the city council get shut down and not have their meeting by pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Then we had people pounding on the windows of the Colorado Convention Center at the Jewish National Fund conference.
Really?
And then we had the Golda Meir house shut down on the campus of Auraria University, so the Jewish students can't have their minyan there, can't use it, and it's only open for specific tours. And that's just 3 incidents in Denver in the past week. and stuff like that really does shake you to the core a little bit. And it does remind you that, we are alone. And I think Chuck Schumer's speech on the floor of the Senate was really, really powerful. I think it got the attention of some people who don't understand what this means to us as Jews. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No. This is exactly why I wanted to raise it, because this is why this Torah portion is so freaking unbelievably powerful, because it is right out of the headlines. We are literally are wrestling with our very soul as a Jewish community worldwide. Okay, because what we're experiencing, my friends in England are experiencing.
Mhm.
I emailed a former congregant, a little kid. I did her bat mitzvah, but she's now like a grandmother. And she lives in suburban London, and she said, "Yeah, it's getting crazy here." And England has a rich history of anti-Semitism. And she said there was a youth soccer league that one team refused to play a team from the local, JCC, because they were Jewish kids. They refused to play. And we are wrestling. We are wrestling, and we may emerge from this a changed Jewish community. And the livado factor, because I keep picking this up over and over again. I feel more alone now as in my Judaism. This is why we need community, because I marched, for civil rights. I marched for Roe Wade. I marched for Black Lives Matter. I marched for gay pride. But nobody's marching for me. And this is happening all over. And that's why I wanted to raise it, because this is right out of the Torah portion. This is we kissed all these organizations, but maybe are they now turning around to bite us? I have no answer, by the way. But my job here with you this afternoon, at least where I am, is to poke you and to get you to think about this and see how the text la'asokes to us, speaks to us from its ancient beauty to the contemporary world, because it does. And then you factor in the generational difference, because we're also seeing that about, do the people my age, baby boomers, react differently than my children's in their 30s and 40s react to this? And we're picking up some of that. We just don't know. We just don't know. But this idea of the wrestling, and the wrestling with our own souls, and the potential for change, and change in the American Jewish community, which is happening anyway, but I think this is going to radically restructure in many ways how we see ourselves in relationship to Israel, and how we see ourselves in relationship to other so-called allies that we've had.
I think there is also, as you mentioned earlier, a generational component to this that really is worrisome. As Ron mentioned, some people have reacted by, re-embracing their Judaism, but other, I think, particularly younger people, partly out of peer pressure, or have distanced themselves from support for Israel. And I think that's very worrisome generational trend.
And we also are dealing with the corruption of this. See this? The class I was just teaching, there was a guy, Moshe, who I've known a long time, and he's Israeli. And he admitted, he said that Israel lost the public relations war and the social media war. Because for a whole variety of reasons, not worth going into now. But we have. I mean, we have the manipulation of news and truth and pictures. You all know. I mean, you see it. You probably read about it and you follow it. There's a tremendous amount of misinformation or non-validated information out there, but people don't read, and no one reads history anymore. Because if anybody studied history, they'd understand a lot more of this. But history to a lot of people is what happened yesterday. And that's getting us into a huge amount of trouble on a variety of different levels. But this is all, again, if you let the text speak to you and say, okay, how does this relate to me and my world in which I'm living? This is right at this Torah portion is right out of the headlines. Right, and very disturbing. I mean, it is very disturbing. What are we wrestling with? What are we changing? How much are we going to change? And are we livado now? Are we alone? Are we alone? So this is tough stuff. This is why this Torah portion is really, really important. But I want to end with an even more challenging segment of this Torah portion. Okay, if you'll go to chapter 34. All right, this is a Torah. This is a story we do not teach the kids in Hebrew school. Yeah, we don't of many in the Torah that we don't teach the kids in Hebrew school. And in fact, one of the things that is really concerning many of my colleagues, including myself, is that we have turned out a generation of young people, high school seniors and into college, who are totally unprepared to deal with the realities of what they're facing on college campuses. The podcast that's up now, my Seekers of Meaning podcast, we just posted yesterday morning, was with the Anti-Defamation League and the head of the Reformed Jewish Educators, specifically on how in the heck can we prepare our kids to go to, Boulder or Stanford or Michigan or the University of Pennsylvania, which is on fire right now. Mm-hmm. And they have no ability at all to deal with the realities of the world in which they're living. And you just can't quote little Bubba Mices and miracle stories because that's what I learned in Hebrew school, all of which are, fantasies anyway. And they really, they addressed it. I mean, they were very good. The guy from the people from the ADL and Stacy were very good. This particular passage is the rape of Dinah or Dina, depending upon which neighborhood Philadelphia you grew up in, whether it's Levine or Levine. Anyway, this is a very, very difficult moral passage. This woman is raped by the prince of and the guy's Shechem, and the guy's father Hamor goes to Jacob and says, "Look, my son loves this, wants this woman. Give me the woman to be." And of course he says, "Well, we'll make a deal, but you have to be circumcised," which in those days was a little bit more painful than it is today. But also they weren't 8 days old. And what happens as a result of the perpetrators of the rape recovering from their circumcision? What happens when Simeon and Levi get a hold of them? Anybody remember the story?
They're killed by the sword.
Not only them, but what else?
Well, their women and children are taken captive.
They wipe it out. That's exactly right. Instead of killing the perpetrators of the crime, these two boys, the brothers, exact total revenge on the entire community. Kill off everybody and take the women and children, some of them captives. Oh my God. This is the Torah portion this week. This is it, chapter 34. What do you do with this now? What do you do with this? How do you teach this when the world is filled with headlines about inappropriate response and retaliation on the part of the Israelis? And yet, here we have this Torah portion where these two brothers, in the context of this portion, be accused of doing the same thing. Okay, rabbis, how do you handle this? What's the interpretation? How do you deal with this? Anybody want to hazard a guess? This is tough stuff, by the way. This is when you go off the Bubba Mices and the miracle stories and all the lovely stories of the Torah deals with real life situations, a lot of which are disturbing. This is one of them. Remember, the Torah God, the God of the Torah, is not a judge of fairness. The God of the Torah has one simple message. You follow my commandments and everything's cool. You don't follow my commandments and I kill you. It's very simple. Go to Korach, go to all those chapters in the book of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's very simple. It's a tribal chic mentality. Okay, you're the rabbi. In an hour, you're going to stand in front of your congregation on Shabbos morning and preach a sermon and do a Devar Torah on this passage. What do you do with it?
You're going to have to read it from the scroll also, because that's not very comforting.
No, you got to read. It's in the Torah. It's right. Unwrap it, man.
Yeah, it is.
How do you do it? How do you begin to work with this? Anybody want to hazard again? This is our tradition. We didn't make this up. This passage is being read this morning. Probably not this particular passage, or it's being read and not translated. Anybody want to hazard a guess? I mean, this is disturbing.
I hate to bring up Fiddler on the Roof, but there's a few scenes where Tevye is really ticked off at God, and he's like, God, I know we're your chosen people because you pick somebody up for a little bit, please. I'm paraphrasing. But
there's a lot of
he's just so comfortable getting in God's face. I'm surprised Tevye didn't flip God the bird a few times.
Well, I'm sure in some production he did, but there's a lot of, by the way, there's a lot of theology, really interesting theology in Fiddler on the Roof. If you unpack it, if you really, you want to have one of the programs I've done with congregations, and my old congregation too, is this sacred cinema, where we take a couple of movies and we look at the movie, but from a Jewish textual and values point of view, which you can do with a lot of movies. Fiddler on the Roof is because it's family dynamics, it's intermarriage, it's intergenerational challenges, it's marriage itself, and it's anti-Semitism, and it's the Messiah. With that, if you want to do that program, there's a ton of great movies. So what's the limit? What? Leona's iPad. Leona, there's a guy next to you. I hope you know who it is.
That's John.
John, what did you say to Leona?
I don't remember seeing that in the movie. I've watched it.
Oh, yeah. It was in the play too. It was in the play too. And it was in all that stuff's in the movie. It's amazing. It's really cool because it's all the theology is huge amount. For example, the end scene in the play, and I think the movie too, and I know in the movie, after the pogroms and they get kicked out of Anatevka, and somebody asked the Rebbe, I thought we were going to wait for the Messiah in Anatevka. And the Rebbe turns around and says, no, we'll have to wait for the Messiah someplace else. That little line is an entire encapsulation of part of the messianic concept of Judaism. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's the Aleinu, but it's also the diaspora. It's fantastic. Just that one little vignette. It's that one little vignette. All right, back to, because we only have like 5 minutes. Back to, what do you want to do with this passage? That was called the rabbinic stall. You mastered that very, very well. We have a class in that at HUC, and you know, in order to think up the answer, we'll go over here, have a little diversion. Okay, that's a rabbinic secret. Don't tell anybody. Okay, what do you do with this passage?
I do not know what we want to do with it, but I know what I don't want to do with it, and I don't want to take it literally. I can't go there.
No, this is how do you relate it to what's happening now? Because it is a brutal passage.
Yeah.
And we view it as a demonstration of the lowest level on which man can operate, and that the hope and the expectation is that we will evolve from there in terms of how we relate to our fellow man.
Yeah, which is part of the messianic hope. But you're right. But go ahead. Who's speaking? I can't tell.
Donna is.
Who?
Donna
Medina.
Okay. Donna by the ocean.
Okay, so they told us when you're asking how it relates to what we're doing now. Well, people in the sons did things according to what they thought was the way to take care of the situation by saying they can't have this happen to this to their sister. And Yaakov said, Abraham said, no, this is going to make me in trouble here, and we're going to have to go talk to God. And they said get rid of all the idols, and then they told him to make an altar. So if you're relating it, they went back to the tefillin. They went back to, they went back to God in the story. So that's what some of us are doing now during this time.
So thank you, Donna. The ability to reinterpret is part of the genius of the Jewish tradition. So for those of you who are interested in so here's a book, one of the too many books that I have surrounding me on biblical interpretations, called Wrestling with Angels. This is by a woman by the name of Naomi Rosenblatt. It's available in paperback on the Great God Amazon, and it is a psycho-spiritual interpretation of the book of Genesis. And so she talks about this particular passage under the rubric, her paragraph reads, the rights of self-defense versus the limits of retribution. This is right out of the headlines. Okay, this is right out of the headlines, because this debate is we read about it every day. Israel has a right to defend itself. How far do you go in defending yourself? Is there a limit to retribution? And she talks about this, but she spins it, Donna, in the relationship of the parents, which is a fascinating way of looking at this. Doesn't justify the overkill, but says here you have two fathers who failed in their responsibility. Hamor, Shechem's father, was only concerned about not concerned about the woman at all, concerned just about making an alliance, getting this woman to be his daughter-in-law, could care less. Jacob, when he understands what his two sons are doing, instead of chastising him and said, no, you can't, it's too much, it's wrong, basically was very, very passive. And Rosenblatt takes this interpretation of saying sometimes parents are afraid to really be actively in discipline and show a child what's right and what's wrong. And when you fail to do that, you encourage the wrong type of behavior. And then she points out that Jacob did not address his two sons until he dies on the deathbed blessing of Jacob towards the very end of Genesis, when he says the following: Simeon and Levi are a pair. Their weapons are tools of lawlessness. Let not my person be included in their council. Let not my being be counted in their assembly. For when angry, they slay people, and when pleased, they maim oxen. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their wrath so relentless. In other words, I didn't chastise them when I should have, but as I'm dying, I curse them for their activity, and I don't want to have anything to do with them. Too late, too late. So again, I wanted to point this out to you because this is a passage. Again, we don't teach this in religious school, but this is part of the story. And you juxtapose this with the beginning of this Torah portion about being alone and reconciliation, and the difficulty of reconciling estranged families, because many of us on this call, and every clergy person, as I said, had to dealing with families who are estranged. Sometimes they reunite. Sometimes they reunite in love. Sometimes they do like Jacob and Esau in the text and say, we can't deal with this anymore. Life's too short. We'll just agree to, we're related, and I don't want, we'll go our separate ways. One of the worst funerals I ever did was with an estrangement many, many years ago, where a father died. The family did the funeral. They're sitting Shiva. The estranged son flew in from out of town, met the family at the funeral home, went to the service. Immediately after the grave was filled, and we announced Shiva, and I said to this person, will I see you back at the Shiva house? He said, no. I have a reservation on a flight in an hour. I cannot go into that house. So very biblical. They reunited like Isaac and Ishmael. They reunited for their father's funeral and then left. Family dynamics, even in the Torah, very, very powerful. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you got an appreciation. This Torah portion is just unbelievable in its power, and it does speak to us because we continue to wrestle with all this stuff. And be careful of the ish, because you never know when that ish is going to come up. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Take care of yourself. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Asher Koach.
Thank you very
Shabbat
much.
shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
You take care, Sherry. Bye-bye.